Okay, today we're going to tie this little shrimp. Could be a crawfish pattern. Uses furry foam. This little guy can be tied in a variety of colors, depending on what kind of fish you're going after and what you want to do. I certainly did not invent this fly, but I had a hard time finding a video for it, so I just thought I'd make one. It took me 6 or so to dial it in, and so you can tie this on a bunch of different hooks. I've got Gamakatsu 1/0 SL12S's, which work great. I've also got these Daiichi 3111s in a 2/0. They're almost the identical size, even though one's a 2/0 and one's a 1/0. I'm going to go with the black hook, which is the Daiichi on this one today. I've tied it in both. I'm going to go ahead and load that in the vise. Thread I'm using is a Veevus 240. It's not GSP because I don't have GSP in this color. If I did, I'd probably be using that. You want to use a pretty heavy thread because you got to cinch a lot of stuff down onto it. So step one here, I'm going to go ahead and just get my thread started. I start towards the back of the hook because I got plenty of time to work forward. I'm going to go down around the bend just a small amount, come back up, cut my thread off. Boy, I got a mess on my table here. Okay, and you gotta, this rides hook point up here, and so you gotta kind of start tying things in that are going to be up the most. So I'll tie the antenna in, then I'll tie the eyes in, and I'll tie this little egg sac kind of feeler area in. Then I tie a few legs in, and then I build the rest of the fly. So I'll start off with the antennas. This is just what they call a Grizzly crystal flash. I like it a lot for antennas. Looks good. I take one strand of this. I like to lay it on the hook shank. If you get too aggressive with this, you'll bend it. So I like to lay it on the hook shank about in the middle. I get 2 wraps on it, 1, 2, and then I pull this piece around. And I want to try to lay that on there, dead center, a little bit on either side of the hook shank, so that they stay separated. And I'm going to wind down quite a way so that they stick up a little bit when that fly is upside down. Go ahead and just hold those in my material holder for now. If I want, I can cut them to length. I like to go about 2 times the length of the hook shank. I'm going to use this fly on redfish in Louisiana, but you could use this all over the place. You could use it on smallmouth that are taking crayfish, all that kind of stuff. I'd rather leave stuff long though, because if I get down there and I need to cut it, I can. Okay, the shrimp eyes, I make these myself. This is 20-pound test mono. I burn the ends. I use loon thick to build the eye up. Let that dry. I paint it with fingernail polish, and then I put a final coat of flow on top of it just to protect the paint. And so I just build these a couple at a time. I take a pair of pliers and I smash this about a 1/2 inch from the eye. I don't know how easy that is to see. And this is just a flat pair of pliers that I bought. And I smash down the mono. That allows me to tie it in a little bit nicer and keep it going. I get the curve and I smash it flat this way, so when I tie those things in, they kind of poke out the direction that I want them to be. So once I smash this flat, then I take and cut it in half. And then I've got my 2 eyes. Okay, so remember your eyes, this thing's going to actually be upside down, so you want your eyes aiming down and out a little bit. And so whatever you've got to do to get those tied in so that they face the correct direction. I usually try to get it nailed down with just a few wraps. I stick the eyes out about a ½ an inch. Some people do it less than that. I like the eyes. I think they look cool, so I let them hang out a little bit. Get this other one started over here. I want to try to look at it from the top down and make sure that my eyes are the same length. Again, I don't think the fish are going to notice. I always say this, the fish won't notice, but the human might, which is me. So I like my flies to look nice. Okay, once I get the eyes in, I like to put a little super glue on. It's just brushable Zap-A-Gap. So I hit this, let it soak in a little bit. That's going to lock these eyes in really well. Make a nice durable fly. Okay. Once I'm this far, I'm going to go ahead and tie in the egg sac portion, or, the shrimp have a lot of little mandible parts where they eat down here, and it's kind of just a mess up in the front there. So this kind of looks like that. I'm by no means a shrimp expert. I just know that the shrimp have this. So I'm going to use orange EP fiber. You could use orange craft fur. You could use rabbit fur. You could use anything you've got. I would not make a special trip to buy orange EP. I just have it sitting here. So this, maybe the gap of the hook is all the longer you want this to stick out. It shouldn't be too over the top here. I'll do a loose wrap, and I'll just kind of cinch that down in there. Work it back. Pull any loose fibers out. I don't want this to be straight at the front, so I'm okay with a little. The fibers are kind of tapered a little bit, but not perfect, Okay, at this point I'm going to build claws. Now I've made this. I tried to build claws with some little rubber legs. It looked all right. I didn't care for it that much. I actually tied it without claws. I think that's an option too. I don't know that fish are going to be like, well, that doesn't have any claws, so I'm not going to eat it. This one has rubber leg claws. So I've done a couple different things here. The one I like the most, I just use some Crawfish orange rabbit strips. These are kind of a little bit of a barred type rabbit strip. They're Magnum strips. That's okay, but I'm going to cut them in half. So I'll take and I'll cut about, I don't know how much that is, about the length of the hook shank, maybe a little less. Cut that off. And then what I'm going to do, like a surgeon, is I'm going to cut right down the middle of this. 2 Magnum strips would be way too much on this. Not only would it create weight via water-soaked rabbit fur, but it's also just, fish look for vulnerable critters to eat. And if you've got one that's got the hugest claws it's ever seen in its life, I don't know if it would exactly go after it. Okay, so to prepare this, I took about the length of the hook shank, cut it in half, and then I just buzz cut off about 1/8 of an inch. And that's where I'm going to tie this in. So I flip this on its side a little bit, and I tie these in directly on the side, because they're going to be underneath the eyeballs when it's upright, right on the ground. Okay, so I don't go to town on this one yet. Hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, I don't go crazy with my wraps yet because I still got another one to tie in once I get this other one in. So I'll do the buzz cut again right here close. Lay this on here. I want these to be the same length if I can, so I'll just look at them from above. Make sure they're about the same length. Then I'll tie this in. Now at this point I'm going to wrap pretty tight, and I'm going to come all the way back. And what I'm kind of trying to do is build a little bit of a taper back here. I tie a lot of stuff in up here, which is okay. I mean, shrimp taper anyways, but I like to get that taper nice. Look underneath, everything looks good. Okay, this is another prime time to apply a little bit of super glue. Keep those legs in place. Again, we're making a durable fly. If I was tying this for carp, I would tie it a lot smaller to look like a crayfish, but I wouldn't use glue. Carp have a really good sense of smell. Okay, last thing I tie in, if you want, you can put a couple strands of Krystal flash in there. I've got the Antena tied in Krystal flash. I'm not going to go over the top. I've got some Sili legs here that go from kind of a salt and pepper clear almost to a bright orange. I'll take 2 of these, lay them on my thread. This is kind of crucial that you get these centered so that the fade to orange looks good. Put those right on top. I'll just wrap back, trying to keep those on top of the hook shank. The last couple wraps on rubber legs, as I approach here, I always do those loose. If you cinch down on rubber legs, you'll cut them. So I just kind of do the last couple wraps loose, cut those about the same length as the Antena. That's done. They're in. Now for, let's see here, I'm going to flip it over real quick. This is the tricky part. I use this furry foam. This furry foam comes in a ton of different colors. I happen to be using a rust color right now. And to prepare this, I'm going to cut a strip, bigger scissors, that's about the same width as the hook gaps. This is maybe, a 1/2 inch or so. So I'll cut this strip that same size. Okay, so it's about the same size or a little bit greater than the hook gap. I cut the top into a little V notch. That creates my tie-in point. Okay, now what I do is I kind of set this on the side. I'm going to wrap forward, grab the tip of that V right there and lock it in. And that locked in what is at the bottom of the hook shank right now. It's the top of the hook shank. And then I'm going to take this and kind of push it back in here a ways. Then I lift it up and just barely stick the point of the hook through there to hold it. And then what I want to do is hold this on top of the hook shank like I have it here. I can flip over and look, but I want to wrap all the way back to where everything's tied in. I'm making sure that it's equal, and that's perfect. This will become the top of the shell. Okay, eyes. You can use, depends on what you're fishing, how deep you're fishing. You can use bead chain eyes, you can use lead eyes. This fuzzy foam has a little bit of buoyancy to it once it soaks up a bunch of water. Not too much. I'm fishing for redfish that are pretty shallow, so I've tied this in large bead chain eyes. I've tied it in small lead eyes and stuff like that, so I'll just do bead chains on this one. When you tie this in, you want your bead chain eyes about, the size of the eye of the hook back. If you go too close, you're not going to have enough room to cinch everything down. Sorry about the blurriness there. Make sure it's in focus. So I tie them back just a little bit. I lock them in real tight. You can apply some glue if you need to. I don't think it's necessary on these. They're in there pretty good. Okay, now I'll wrap back this way. And now I create a dubbing loop, a pretty good size one, about 6 inches or so. Wrap here, wrap here. And then I bring my thread about midway between where everything's tied in here and the eyes, because I'm going to have a segment right there. Use my dubbing twister. Sorry you can't see this, but hopefully you know how to make a dubbing loop. If not, I should guarantee there's videos on that. Use a little bit of wax here, wax the thread up pretty heavily. Set that aside. Dubbing I'm using is a UV Spirit River. I'm going to use the orange rust and the root beer. I blend it together. So a little less orange than root beer. The shrimp where I'm going in Louisiana, some shrimp are, it just depends on where you are in the world. Root beer is a pretty good color because it's got a little chartreuse in it, but not all shrimp reflect chartreuse. The Louisiana shrimp do. Some of them reflect like a bluish color or you name it. But this is a pretty good, blend here. It's shrimpy looking. Stuff that in my dubbing loop. Spread it out. I want a pretty lengthy dubbing loop if I can get it. I'm really going to wrap this tight. Okay, now I can start to wrap this palmer, this dubbing loop around the hook shank. Get it nice and tight up in the front. As I approach that middle point, I'm going to wrap over like this, and then I'm going to flip this just like that. What that's going to allow me to do is pull this down over. And I could pull it really tight. I don't want to. I leave it a little bit of slack there, you can see. Kind of makes that hump back that shrimp have. Do a couple loose wraps here, and I'll cinch that down. So I did 2 like that. I'll take one tight one in here, and then I move my thread to just before the eyes. So now I'll do another wrap here. Flip it over. I'm going to make another segment right before the eyes. Again, I'm not pulling this really tight. I want kind of a little hump there so that segment sticks out. Do 2 loose wraps. Cinch down on that. One underneath. Then I'll move in front of the eyes. Okay, when I bring my dubbing loop, I try to cover those eyes up from the bottom. Bring all this to the front. Tie that off. Pull it back this way. A few more wraps in there. I've got a good amount of space in front of the eyes here, which I like. My number one mistake is I crowd up on that hook eye, and I always regret it. Okay, now I can fold this over again. Make another segment, so I'll do 2 loose wraps. I can adjust the size of the segment by kind of pulling this a little bit. I might have to loosen up on that. Ideally, they'd be perfectly the same size, but nothing's really perfect. At least not me. So there we go. When I cut the tail, you can go various lengths here. I go, ½ an inch or so, and then I kind of round the cut. Shrimp tail's a little bit rounded, like that. You can whip finish up under here if you want. I've been whip finishing just right over the top of this last segment because it works just fine. So I'll whip finish like 3 or 4 times right here. Cut my thread. Go ahead and super glue the top. Let's soak in a little bit. Okay, couple more things. I'm going to rat this out just a little bit. Shrimp underneath their shell in the back have lots of these little swimmerettes. They're like little teeny legs that move depending on which way they're swimming. That's what this is supposed to look like. I pull them all up. I give them a little bit of a buzz cut here. And I like to spread them side to side a little bit like that. So that will sit kind of just like that right there. The other thing I do, let me put it back in the vise real quick. Sharpie, this is optional step here. I come in and I just gently hit the segments a little bit. Make them stand out a little bit more. Kind of polka dot model the front there. And there she be. This is a fuzzy foam shrimp. Crawfish shrimp. There you have it, folks. Thanks for watching.